Today we're going to talk about additive inverse, absolute value, and interval notation. So we're kind of building off of the set builder notation that we talked about last week, and we are adding some things to it. So this section's kind of a bunch of different ideas squished together in one section, but we're just going to do it. Okay, the first thing, additive inverse of any real number. A is negative A. So basically additive inverse means what can you add to it to get 0. So for example, the additive inverse of 5, what 5 plus what is 0? So the additive inverse of 5 is negative 5. Okay, the second one, the additive inverse of negative 3. So the opposite of negative 3 would be positive 3. So the first couple problems on your homework is just additive inverse. So those should go pretty quick. Okay, the next thing we need to talk about is absolute value. So the absolute value of any real number A is the distance on the number line from 0 to A. So find the absolute value of 3. So we put those absolute value bars around 3. Since it's talking about distance, remember absolute value is always positive. So the absolute value of 3 is 3. A lot of students want to pick the opposite of the number, but remember that's additive inverse, not absolute value. Okay, the second one, find the absolute value of negative 7. So if I put negative 7 inside the absolute value bars, remember that is measuring distance. So the distance from 0 to negative 7 is 7. So the absolute value of negative 7 is positive 7. Absolute value is always positive. All right, we're going to do some operations with absolute value. Number 1, it says 8 plus negative 13, and then the absolute value of that number. So we start on the inside of the absolute value bars and work our way out. So 8 plus negative 13. So that would be 8 minus 13, which would be negative 5. And then the absolute value bars are around negative 5, so the absolute value of negative 5 is positive 5. And we put a box or circle around it. Okay, number 2, this looks like the same problem, but it's actually not. We have the absolute value of 8 plus the absolute value of negative 13. So in order to do this problem, we have to take the absolute value of both of these and then add them together. So absolute value of 8 is 8. Bring down the addition sign. Absolute value of negative 13 is positive 13. And then we add those together and we get 21. So even though problems 1 and 2 look very similar because they're using the same numbers, the placement of the absolute value bars are different, which makes the answer different. So make sure you're careful when you're doing your practice problems. All right, so we need to refamiliarize ourselves with working with a number line. So remember, if a number is less than b, that means that number is to the left of b on the number line. And if a is greater than b, then that means a is to the right of b on the number line. So for practice here, it says order the set negative 4, 0, 3, negative 1 from least to greatest on the number line. So what number is smallest out of those 4 numbers? And that would be negative 4. So I'm just going to place that over here all the way to the left. The next smallest number would be negative 1. So we'll say that that is here. Next smallest number is 0, which would be right next to negative 1. And then the next biggest number would be 3. So that would go there. So negative 4, negative 1, 0, and 3, that is the order that they should be on the number line. All right, the last thing we need to talk about is interval notations. This is another way to write sets of numbers. So there's a couple different notations that we're going to use. We use parentheses, regular parentheses, when it's not included or not equal to. So when you see these two inequality signs, that's when you use parentheses. And then you use brackets if it's included or equal to. So less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. So these are like the examples you're going to see on your practice problems. So number 1, we read this the same way we read set builder notation. This says the set of all x such that x is greater than 2. So the first thing I do is place this number in the middle of the number line. And I think about where are the numbers bigger than 2. So that is this direction. And then since this inequality sign is just greater than, it's not equal to, I'm going to open a parenthesis towards the set of numbers. So it's an open parenthesis facing the numbers bigger than 2 on the number line. And now I need to write this in interval notation. So I'm going to copy what I have on my graph here. So I'm going to do an open parenthesis and a 2. This goes on forever in the positive direction, so infinity. And then there's always a parenthesis around infinity, never a bracket around infinity. So the graph and the interval notation are my two solutions for number 1. Okay, number 2, this says the set of all x such that x is less than or equal to -3. So the first thing I'm going to do is put -3 in the middle of my number line. And this says less than or equal to, so that means I'm going to shade to the left because I know that's where the numbers less than -3 are. And my inequality sign is equal to, so that means I need to use a bracket facing the direction where the numbers are. So this here is half of my solution. The second half is my interval notation. So I'm going to start and copy this. -3 is my biggest number, and there's a bracket around it, comma. This goes forever in the negative infinity direction, so there's a negative sign. And just like I said on the last problem, it's a parenthesis, not a bracket, because we never use brackets around infinity. Okay, my last example kind of joins those last two examples together. This says a set of all x such that x is bigger than 0 and less than or equal to 6. So this time I've got two numbers that we're talking about here. We have a starting and an ending point, so I'm going to put 0 to the left and 6 to the right. And this says greater than 0, less than 6. So that means I know that I need to shade in between. And then the numbers near 0 are going to be parentheses because they are not equal to. And the numbers around 6 are going to be a bracket because it is equal to. So this is part of my answer. And the second part, I just need to copy exactly what I have on my number line. So parentheses 0, comma 6, and bracket.